Hey, today I'm going to show you how to use this level 5 24-inch wide skim coating blade to do skim coating, butt joints, big repairs, and I'm going to show you all that and all about it right after this. Hey, I recently picked up this level 5 skim coating blade, and I've only had a few chances to use it, but so far I love it. There are a few drawbacks to it, so I'm going to talk about those, but I'm going to show you how to use this for several situations, such as we're going to get rid of this ugly, well, actually this one isn't an ugly texture, but it is the way I did some samples in a previous video about how to spray orange peel texture. So we're going to make all three of these samples go away using the skim coating blade. And I'll tell you why you might want a skim coating blade. I'll show you some, or I'll tell you about some other methods that you can do this. And I'll try and explain how this blade works, the features of it, and so on. And you can decide if this might be the blade for you. Hey, unless you just happen to have a whole lot of this stuff sitting around and you just got money to burn, then you probably want to save some money. Well, one of the ways you can save money is by doing these kind of repairs yourself. I've been doing drywall for about 35 years. First walked on stilts when I was 8 years old. So it's my goal to pass on my skills to you guys. I'm going to teach you in these videos how to do your own home improvement projects like drywall repairs, skim coating, texturing, and many, many more tasks and tricks and tips. So if you like learning those kind of things and you want to save some money, be sure and click on that subscribe button. And if you click the little bell icon right after you click subscribe, then you'll get notified each time we put out a video, so you won't miss anything. Now on to this blade. There's several companies out there that make these. This one happens to be made by Level 5, and I've honestly waited quite a long time to buy it because I debated on, is it really necessary? Is it really going to benefit me? It's kind of pricey. It's around $90, I think it was. But I finally bit the bullet and bought it because it really seemed like a valuable tool. Now that I've got it, I'm glad I have. I've used it twice now, and both of them were on repairs, so I had to float it out about 3 to 4 feet wide. And this just really sped things up, gave me a nice level, smooth coat of mud. And I'll show you those advantages here in a minute. But first, let me go over the design of it. It's kind of interesting. If you compare this to a normal blade, well, a normal blade like this is fixed. Nothing moves. It's got a semi-rigid spine right here. You can bend it, but it's not meant to flex much. And then the blade flexes a little, but it's still fairly rigid. Well, when we compare this, first of all, this is just a protecting shield so you don't ding up your blade. Well, this consists of two parts. This aluminum part right here that you grip, and this is how you hold it, and it's fairly rigid. It's really not meant to bend at all. Then you have the flexible blade part, and this blade, you can see it's pretty wide. You can actually replace these blades, so if you were to damage it, you just slide the blade out. So I'm going to show you the blade. So now with it out of there, you can see this is pretty flexible. It's actually way flexible. But up against that rigid backing where it's writing right here, it gives it a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of stiffness at the same time, so that you get a nice flat surface when you're floating things out. And that's what appealed to me. The more I thought about it, the more I thought, you know, this flexible nature here, rigid backing right here, this thing ought to make nice flat coats when you're trying to coat nice and wide. This thing works really well, but I just thought, you know, wider is better when we're floating these things out. So you can get different widths of these down to narrow ones, and I think they go up to 3 feet, I believe. I'll put links to these in the description down below, so if you want to go check them out. We do make a small commission if you purchase anything, and that helps our channel grow. I've used it a few times, and honestly, it feels really good when it's going over the surface. It has a nice smooth feel. You've got good control. I actually like that you need to use two hands, because sometimes you want just a little more pressure out here, and the wider blade with just a knife would be a little bit harder to do that. It's really a feel thing, I would say. Now, is it totally necessary? No. You can get by with these knives. I've done that for 30 some years. But now that I have it, if you're going to be a professional drywaller, I think this thing would really benefit you, because it can speed up certain tasks. And you probably see my helper walking around here. His name is Sketch. Now, as far as skim coating, there's actually about 3 or 4 ways you can do it. We're going to do it today with this, but you can also roll the mud on with a paint roller and then smooth it out. You could smooth it out with a knife. You could smooth it out with this, or smooth it out with a rubber trowel. Now, they have these made just for drywall. For you novices out there, this is a pretty affordable way of getting a smooth finish if you're not very good with a knife. So I'll leave a link to these in the description down below. The other way to do it is simply spread it on with your knife, and I'll kind of show you that, because you have to do that to start with, and you can get a pretty smooth finish that way. I've done whole houses with nothing but a pan and a knife. Now I'll show you one more accessory that goes with this. This is separate. You'd have to buy this separately, and I'm a little bit disappointed with this thing. I'll tell you why in a second. First, how you install this, I found, is you just put it on here. There's a center mark if you want to really center it, but you just put it on here and snap it on. Now, it is made to hook up to a paint pole, but what I don't like is it won't hook up to just any old paint pole. This is my favorite style of pole. I just bought this. These are really nice poles, and the reason I like it is it's infinitely adjustable. You can adjust it in any increment at all, and it just locks in place. You don't have to have the holes. But now I can't use it on this because they want me to buy their special handle, and I don't really agree with that. You would now have to buy their special pole. So if you're doing a lot of this, it's a minor inconvenience, but I really think they should have made it fit any old paint pole. Okay, since we're using this for skim coating, to do this skim coating, what you would need to coat something this rough is a sand pole, a way of sanding it, and the blade, and then your pan and knives to put it on. So your basic mudding tools, and I'll leave descriptions to where you can pick those up on Amazon in the description down below. And then of course we got this blade. Okay, our objective here is to get a level 5 finish, so it's probably going to take 2 coats. Now the first step is, because of all this bumpiness on here, you want to scrape it. There's always going to be some little peaks that'll make your knife jump and chatter, and you'll get the washboard look on here, and it'll just mess up what you're trying to do. So just get you a blade and scrape the whole thing first, and then we're going to sand it. Okay, now the next step is you want to sand it. You could probably get by without sanding it after you scrape it, but I found that doing these two together gives me an even better chance of knocking down those last little peaks that are sticking out. So I like to use an 80 grit on a sand pole. If you're a novice, there's a sander called a radius sander. So I can't show it to you today, but here's a picture of it. And this thing works great, because this one's a little harder to use for amateurs because of the fact that it sometimes will want to flip like that. The radius doesn't want to, so check that out in the description down below. Just go over it once real quick, knock down the final peaks, and then we're ready to move on. Okay, now normally on something like this, you're not going to have that much dust, so you probably don't need to dust it. You can if you want to, though. Okay, the next step would be to put a solid coat of mud on this and float it all out. But first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend like this is a butt joint right here. We're going to coat that a little bit, and then we'll go back to skim coating the whole thing, because that's going to show the other use for this blade. Now, whenever I'm skim coating or coating anything heavy, I like to use the mud pretty thick, so this is pretty close to straight out of the box. It's probably thinned down a little bit. Okay, let's say you just want to split this one like so. So put a good coat on there. Now to use the skim coating blade, I basically do the same thing as I would normally do coating a butt joint. So I put it on pretty decent, and then I go ahead and feather the edges, which means tilting your blade, putting more pressure on the outside edge. And then I'll usually, depends on how this comes out, if it's on a ceiling right out in the open, I'll feather the ends. You can see it's going to cover pretty much the whole thing. And I'm going to get more bubbles because I'm doing this over a painted surface. It always bubbles more when you do that. But the advantage is we have less lap marks. So we basically have that one lap mark. Now if I did it with a knife, you end up with two. I'm going to take a little bit too much off, but you always end up with one down the middle because you're using a 12-inch times 2. So that's your basic advantage on a butt joint, is coating it wider. Sometimes you got to coat these really wide. So let's just say you had to coat it that wide. You could leave it, I think you could leave it pretty sloppy like this. We'll go ahead and feather. And then we're just going to try and smooth all that out with this blade. So in this case, it's not going to cover the whole thing. So let's just kind of do a split here, putting more pressure on this outside edge, and that's where that nice flexible blade comes in. And it's got a slight hump there, so I'm going to go over it one more time. Now I could just go right down the middle if I wanted to get that, and then come back. So I think it leaves a really pretty butt joint. It's got a nice shape to it right off the bat. For me, it sped things up when I was doing my repair. Okay, so now let's just continue. If we're skim coating this, we just first got to coat everything. Now I do like to, when I'm skim coating, I try and put the mud on fairly evenly to start. So I usually don't like to leave too much of this rough stuff. So if you see me go over it a couple times, I'm evening the mud out. See right there, I had a little light spot. So if you can see that on camera, it's a little light. So what I did is I still got mud on here. I just come down. When I get close to that, I can lay a little more mud on it and it goes away. Now, it doesn't have to be super smooth at this point. So the next step would be to just start smoothing it, and whatever works for you, you can run it sideways, top to bottom. I'm not even sure what I'm going to do. I left the mesh tape in there. Oh well. Now, you'll notice on my system here, this is a brand new setup. This is my brand new studio. This is video number 2. One of the things I've done is made this accent light up here. I can turn this on and off as I need to. And if I really want to make everything stand out, I turn off these other lights and you can see the defects even more. You can probably see the bubbles over here. This is the first time I've used this, so I hope you can see these. They stand out much better when you light across the surface like this. All right, now for a level 5 or a smooth finish, this is about all I would take it, because I know that heavy a texture to get it level 5. It's going to take 2 coats anyway. Okay, a little trick here, little drywaller's trick. When you're coating wide stuff like this and you got these overlap marks, you want to leave this lap mark that looks kind of like this, versus I'm going to come over here to the edge and ruin this. If you leave an edge where you're leaving a gouge type edge, that's much harder to sand off. The one where this edge is actually going up on top of that one, I call it a lap mark. When it does that, all you got to sand off is that little peak right there. It sands off easy. If you do it this way, you pretty much can't sand it off. So the way you leave lap marks correctly is, when you want the lap mark over there, you put a slight more amount of pressure on the other side. And then like when I did this one, I put the more pressure on the bottom that pushed the lap mark to the middle. I don't have any of those gouge type lap marks, and it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. We're going to let this dry overnight, come back, sand it, do another coat. Okay, I've let this dry overnight. It's dried thoroughly. So the first step for today is just to sand it. Now, I would recommend you wear a mask. If I wear a mask, it's hard to talk, but I'd recommend you wear one for safety. If you start seeing texture coming through, you may be going too far, because you're going to have to recover that. So you're trying to just smooth it out so we can do the next coat. Now I'm sanding with 80 grit, so it's pretty aggressive. And if you can see right here, there's a lot of sanding scratches, and that's okay at this step. But I've basically leveled it out. So now if you see, it's still fairly rough. There's some of the texture showing through right here, the bumpiness. And then there's all these sand scratch marks that I'm leaving, and that's okay, but we're trying to take off these lap marks like here. Now when you sand afterwards, there's always going to be this little layer of dust on here, so I recommend that you vacuum that off. If you want, you can go over it with a damp rag or a damp mop, but be very gentle, because it doesn't take anything to damage it with a wet rag. So just go over it lightly. So at this point, we're basically ready to do the same thing again. We're going to put another coat on. I'm going to put it on pretty thin because I don't see much texture left to cover, but you don't want it real thin at this point unless it came out really, really good. But I know that there's still a few deeper things, so I'm going to put a medium thin coat on. All right, that's coated, so now it's time to let that dry. We're gonna put a fan on it, come back, sand it with some fine grit. We'll probably go to 220, and this thing should be ready for texture, almost ready for level 5. I'm gonna do a separate video continuation of this to show you how to do a level 5. Okay, this dried, so on camera right now, it probably looks really good, and it's in pretty dang good shape. This is smooth from top to bottom, except there's one area. Can you see it? It runs right down the middle where we overlapped it, and that's why I created this upper lighting here so I can show it to you better. This should make it stand out a little bit better, and I'll show you a picture of it here. And all that is it's the area where the two overlapped. So the one final step for a skim coating like this would be to sand it and then do minor touch-up. It doesn't have to be perfect, depends on what kind of texture you're putting. The heavier the texture, the less work you got to do, but we definitely want to get rid of that one. For this step, I have changed my sandpaper to a 220 grit because you don't want to leave those scratches like we did before. Make sure this is in good shape. If you got any little torn edges, wrinkles, anything like that, it will scratch right where that's at. So it's got to be a good piece of paper. So I'm going to go ahead and sand that, show you how to touch it up, and show you the final result. Now here's a little sanding pointer. You know, we were trying to mainly sand out this middle area. When you're sanding, you want to make sure that if you are using anything that's rectangular or even square, don't hold it straight like this, hold it at an angle. Otherwise those straight lines tend to dig in. And even if it's square, hold it a little bit of an angle. If it's round, it doesn't matter. But there's one more tip. Don't concentrate just right on one area, back and forth. Move up and down a little bit so that you're kind of feathering out your sanding, or you're going to kind of dig yourself a valley in here. So more like this. And that'll give you a lot better results. So we'll go ahead and vacuum this. Okay, so there you have it. That is plenty smooth for any texture out there. Plenty. Nothing's going to show through that. Now, if you want to leave this totally smooth, this isn't really quite there. It's close. But if you do a large area, you're still going to have some little defects. You may still find a little pinhole here and there. And I'm going to show you how to take it to level 5. There's kind of a few little tricks. I'll do that in a separate video if you want to check that out. But this is ready for texture. But this could be left smooth if you don't want the absolute smoothest. If you're willing to have a few minor defects, this is going to look really good. So I hope that helped you out. If you like this video, I'd appreciate it if you share it on your social media, let others know. And of course, as always, if you want to subscribe, click the bell icon. We'd appreciate that too. More importantly, I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Take care.